Welcome to the House Ag and Natural Resource Budget Committee, or anybody from the floor have any bill introductions? Okay. We will open the hearing on the curb budget, and Luke will have a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Luke Drury, and I am Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Luke Drury. I am a senior fiscal analyst with the Kansas Legislative Research Department, and I will be presenting the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board budget. Today, in the audience behind me is David Nickel, Consumer Counsel for the board, and he will be able to answer questions and give a presentation for you all as well after my budget analysis. Beginning on page 1, the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board acts as an advocate for residential and small commercial utility ratepayers in Kansas in order to protect their interests. CURB's mission is to provide ratepayers in Kansas with competent and quality legal representation before the Kansas Corporation Commission, various courts, and the Kansas Legislature. CURB is funded by assessments levied against public utilities whose cases CURB can intervene. If we turn over to page then 4 of the analysis, on the top of page 4, there's a table that gives more details in regard to actual expenditures along with the agency's estimate and governor recommendations for FY 2024 and FY 2025 by expenditure category. Below that is a review of the Utility Regulatory Fee Fund. The Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board is a fee-funded agency. The only source of funds for the agency is this Utility Regulatory Fee Fund. It's a statutory fee fund that is financed through quarterly assessments on gas, electric, and telephone companies in Kansas as required under statute. One assessment is based on end-of-year expenditures plus anticipated increases for the ensuing year, which is then prorated among the utilities. That amount cannot exceed the greater of $100 or 0.2% of the company's gross operating revenue derived from intrastate operations in the prior calendar year. Another assessment is made for actual costs incurred by CURB during an investigation of a particular public utility, and the assessment cannot exceed 3/5 of 1% of the utility's gross operating revenue derived from intrastate operations in the prior calendar year. When we turn over to page 5, I'll go into a little bit more detail on revenues, expenditures, and ending balances for the Utility Regulatory Fee Fund. As you can see, the table at the top there shows on the left-hand side, or the green columns, are revenues for a given fiscal year. On the right side, red is expenditures for a given fiscal year, and then the yellow line that goes across all of those years is the ending balance. Remember from the other budgets that we have heard so far is that ending balance is really just a snapshot in time. As of June 30 of any given year, that is the ending balance that it was in this fund. Ending balances of the Utility Regulatory Fee Fund increased in FY 2022 when compared to 2021, and it is attributable to a combination of higher revenues and lower expenditures in FY 2022 when compared to 2021. In FY 2022, revenues exceeded expenditures by roughly $130,000, while expenditures exceeded revenues by roughly $116,000 in 2023. For FY 2024 and FY 2025, the agency is estimating revenues and expenditures of similar amounts, which would result in relatively balanced or flat ending balances for 2024 and 2025. The agency regularly budgets above estimated expenditures to ensure that adequate funds are available in the occurrence of increased case filings. However, the cash flow analysis on the agency projected revenues and expenditures by month do indicate that the agency may experience a negative balance at some point during FY 2024 and FY 2025. These balances can occur when an agency has expenditures and account payable balances that are larger than revenues and account receivable balances. I did speak with the agency about this, and I do believe that they will be able to speak to this a little bit more moving forward. But like I say, this is very much an analytical tool that our offices use that looks at historic expenditures by month over a period of years, combined with historical revenues by month over a period of years, and then averages those given estimated expenditures, revenues, and ending balances. When we turn over to page 6, I'll begin with the FY 2024 analysis. There were no adjustments that were made to the $1.3 million that was appropriated to the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board for FY 2024. The agency submits, that's subsequent to the 2023 session, there were no adjustments that were made. The agency requests a revised estimate of $1.4 million, all from that utility regulatory fee fund in FY 2024. And this is an increase of about $87,000 or 6.9% above the amount that was approved by the 2023 legislature. And this is attributable to one item. This is for consultant services. The agency is authorized each year by language in the appropriations bill to carry over unspent funds for consultant services between fiscal years to ensure sufficient funds during years with higher numbers of rate cases. For this particular year, the agency carried over $87,749 for accountants and auditors from 2023 into 2024. So that is to say, the actual expenditures in 2023 were lower than estimated, therefore rolling it over into the current year, FY 2024. The governor concurs with the agency's FY 2024 revised estimate and recommends no changes. Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions or I can move forward to FY 2025.
Committee, any questions on 24? Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Luke. I was just wondering on the consultant services, when they roll those dollars forward, then do they continue to do that from year to year? And then is there a balance there somewhere that they're carrying forward from year to year? How does that work?
Mr. Chair, Representative, to answer the question, they will carry that forward. So in 2023, they underspent by that 87. That carries over then to 2024. They put that in the budget to spend, but if that does not get spent again, then yes, it would roll over into 2025. However, when we get to the 2025 analysis, you will see that those expenditures have been backed out. That is to say, they're not anticipating that to happen, but on any given year, it can happen. All right, moving on then to page number 7. And this is a look at the FY 2024 request versus the actual expenditures for 2023. The agency estimates revised expenditures totaling $1.4 million, all from the utility regulatory fee fund in 2024. This is an increase of $304,000, and about 28.8% above 2023 actual expenditures. And the increase is partially attributable to that $87,000 that we just discussed, carrying over from 23 into 24. The remaining changes are attributable to the salary increases that were approved by the 2023 legislature. This is for that 5% statewide increase. That includes base salaries and wages, as well as fringe benefits, employer contributions, and the such as well. The agency is also estimating building rental space, software rental to be a little bit higher as well. Moving on then to page number 8, which is just the back page of the document, is the FY 2025 analysis. The agency requests $1.3 million, all from the utility regulatory fee fund for FY 2025. And this is a decrease of $70,000, about 5.2% below the FY 2024 revised estimate. And this is primarily attributable to those consultant services that we talked about just a little bit earlier. Item number 1, the agency is authorized by language in the appropriations bill to carry over those unspent funds between fiscal years. This authorization increases the agency's estimated expenditures for consulting services in 2024, but for 2025, there are no carryover funds budgeted, and this creates that decrease that we were just talking about. All other adjustments made by the agency result in increases of about $17,000, and this is mostly attributable to increases in other contractual services, as I mentioned earlier. Building space rental is one of those. That's the lion's share. And the governor concurs with the agency's 2025 request and makes recommends no changes to that. Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions, or as I say, David Nickel from the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board is here, and he will be able to speak with the committee.
Hold on, Luke. Representative, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. They backed out the consultant services because they don't anticipate needing that, but we still have 6 months of the year. Is it, would they, I assume, be able to manage if they had to do something about that and get through the 6 months and then do an additional amount next year? Or, I mean, so they can add money at the end of the year if they find they need consultants in the next 6 months that they didn't anticipate?
Mr. Chair, Representative, to answer the question is the agency regularly budgets higher than anticipated expenditures for contractual services. Part of that is that unspent money that carries over. Language in the appropriation bill allows that to carry over just for the given year.
I'm not worried about carrying over. I'm just wondering, since they are not carrying it over, what if they wind up needing consultants? I don't know.
Mr. Chair, that's something that I can look into, or perhaps the agency could answer as well.
I'll ask the agency. Thank you. Thank you, Lucas.
Committee, any questions for Luke? Good job, Luke. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. David Nickel, welcome to our committee.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Corbett, members of the committee. I'm David Nickel. I'm Consumer Counsel for the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board. I want to start with a thank you. This has been a good year for the ratepayer. I want to turn the attention to the committee to the last page of our budget analysis or our metrics. This is not having to do with this particular fiscal year. It has to do with next fiscal year because that's the timing of the case. But this chart shows you the result that we got in the biggest rate case I think that Kansas has experienced in quite some time. CURB asked for and received $150 million, nearly $160 million decrease in the rates requested by the Evergy companies in this particular rate case. Actually, the results were higher than that because the commission staff, and hats off to them, took a very aggressive role in terms of protecting the ratepayer in this particular case. So my hats off to the commission staff and also to the commission for granting the rate decrease as it was. It's a good year for the ratepayer in Kansas. But a large part of that has to do with the work of this committee and also with regard to the work of you in terms of your legislative abilities, because you have allowed the KCC and CURB the tools, not only for statutory tools to represent residential and other ratepayers, but also from a budget standpoint to allow us to implement those duties to help lower rates for Kansans. So all told, hats off to you. We appreciate the work that you have. I will tell you that I am part of the executive committee for the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates. That's a group of consumer advocates like CURB throughout the nation. And I attend semi-annual meetings, and I get up to give a roundtable of the states. And I always talk about what's going on in Kansas. And usually it's like, okay, this is something that I wanted to address. It's something that's a concern to ratepayers. And I'll give my little speech. And then somebody will get up behind me from North Carolina, or from Michigan, or someplace. And by the time they're speaking, I think, thank God I live in Kansas. We have it so much better here in terms of our regulatory scheme than other states have. Some of the things that other states are doing, you go, oh my gosh, how in the world do they ever protect ratepayers? Well, thanks to you as legislators and the policies that you have presented, we've fared okay. We fared certainly okay. I want to tell you that we have exceeded our metrics this last fiscal year, as we have in past years. And I'm going to turn you to page 4 of the metrics that we've got and just walk through those very, very quickly. So that shows our performance-based metrics for fiscal year 2023. And you'll see that we have intervened in all rate cases that were filed during the fiscal year. That's output line 1. In terms of results, we have helped the KCC to arrive at $4.56 million in terms of rate cases that were filed and determined in fiscal year 2023 versus our cost of roughly 150 and a half $1,000. So all told, our metrics, we save money for the ratepayer by our involvement. In terms of other rate cases, other types of cases that are filed with the KCC, we have also intervened in 100% of the cases that were substantial. And the cost savings that we have for ratepayers versus hiring private firms to fulfill our role is from $260 to $917. So about $650,000 worth of savings for ratepayers in regard to our representing ratepayers before all KCC cases. Notwithstanding our results in our rate cases. We have been active before the legislature. We've analyzed 16 legislative bills and we've testified on a number of those. We have different outreach programs. I'm going to speak to that in a little bit. Outreach programs to reach consumers. And that's probably the most important role that I could see that we should expand in the coming years. And then we spend some time in terms of policy research. And why that's important is there are always changes in the industry. For example, we're going to talk about two today. The first is time of use rates, which were granted by the KCC as permanent, optional time of use rates that were granted by the KCC in the last Evergy rate cases. And those are a real change from historic billing practices and something that we want to get behind and help educate consumers. And then energy efficiency. And the magic of energy efficiency is it allows the consumer to reduce their bills while still having the same level of comfort. So for example, if you have an HVAC system that's much more efficient than an inefficient HVAC system, you can still enjoy a relatively conservative amount of warmth or cool, but not spend any more money for it. Or in the alternative, you can actually end up with actually less cost. So it's a good thing for the ratepayer, and over time, it benefits all ratepayers because it helps reduce power cost and it helps reduce capacity cost. Do want to speak a little bit about our budget. Our budget has remained flat until about 2023 at about $1 million or a little less. In 2023, as Luke indicated, this committee and the governor, the legislature gave us an additional 2 FTEs. We went from 7 until 9. And so we jumped in terms of those associated, our budget with regard to those salaries and their benefits and associated expenses, about $300,000. So we stand right now at 1.3, and we'll remain flat with those in perpetuity until we actually increase our FTEs, and I don't see that happening in any time in the future. The FTEs will say are important to us. They allow us to do 3 things. One is we need continuity in our agency. Learning utility, regulatory policies and law is about a 5-year learning curve. So you get somebody trained, they're here for 5 years, and lo and behold, they get poached. Somebody pulls them out from under you, or they find a better job someplace else and they leave. If your agency is small like our agency was, that leaves you with a learning deficit. And as a result of that, we're not very effective by going before the KCC or going before the legislature or doing any other types of our jobs. So from a continuity standpoint, those jobs are very, very important to us. Secondly, we need to develop expertise. When I go to these NASUCA meetings, it's typically what happens is one of the agencies will stand up and say, does anybody know of any consultants that we can hire? Because we can't find any consultants. And usually about that time, I slink down into my seat because I really don't want to disclose, hey, we've got some consultants that you may be able to hire. We want to keep them to ourselves. But the truth is, this is a dying breed. Consultants on utility regulatory matters are not to be found anymore. We're lucky this last year our consultant renewed, but gave us pretty clear warning maybe another 5 years, 4 years, and they're out. We need to develop the expertise within staff to be able to handle those, because if we reach out and can't find a consultant, we're a ship that's dead in the water. We don't want to be in that position, and our ratepayers that we represent don't want us in that position. And then the other thing that's really important is that we need staff to be able to do the research that we need to be able to do. There are things that are coming down the pike: time of use rates, energy efficiency, state energy plans. There's an interesting thing that's going on in Iowa. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Iowa has really brought in data centers. Well, the good thing about data centers, they actually help the economy to some extent. They don't hire a lot of employees because you don't need them for that, but they use a tremendous amount of power. So Iowans are now struggling with the notion of where you're going to get the power. It's not imminent threat, but it's coming. So those types of issues we need to be able to research, so we're avant-garde on addressing those issues at the time that they come to Kansas. Because I would anticipate Kansas is going to see continued economic development, and I would anticipate with that economic development, we're going to see more power needs. We need to be able to address that from a best practices standpoint, and we hope that CURB and our staff will be able to do that. So with that, we'd ask for approval of our budget as we've requested and the governor's approved, and I'll stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions? Representative Garber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for attending today and giving your talk. You have 9 FTE positions. Are they all filled?
They're not filled. Thank you for that question. It's a great question. We have filled 8. It is very difficult to find. It's difficult to find people that are interested in the utility field. My conjecture is this: if you want to be alone at a cocktail party, just say, "Hey, I work in the utility field." You'll find that they go away pretty soon. So it's not the most dynamic. It's a very interesting, wonderful place to work, but it is not something that's highly romanced. And so it's difficult to find people. And then you say, well, and it's another 5, you're smart, this another 5 years of you're learning to be able to be efficient. It's difficult to find them. We did find an accountant. Thankfully, that's been a good find for us. We've advertised for an attorney, have not got any qualified applicants. We intend to file again, or when the next, for the next graduation rate, we intend to file or to advertise again and hopefully be able to fill that position.
All right.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Chairman.
I've got a couple of questions for you. So, you hear this a lot when you're in a probst and in tax and whatever. How does Kansas rate with power rates, like for electricity and whatever, compared to our 4 states around us? Because are we competitive for electric rates, or are the states around us have a better package?
I think KCC can probably address that a little better than but my impression is this: we have become more competitive than we have been, in large part due to this last rate case that we've had, and then additional rate cases. I don't know that we would be as low as, say, Oklahoma, but I think we're certainly competitive with other states in the SPP footprint. And I think they addressed that before House Energy and Utilities Committee, and I think KCC is better to address that. But from my impression, we're doing a lot better. So,
Committee, any Representative Curtis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that you had a real good year this year, and thank goodness for our ratepayers. Do you see anything coming down the pike here soon that you'll have to be dealing in the form of another type of a case like we had with Evergy, or are you seeing anything on the horizon?
we can never forecast when those are going to occur, but would anticipate that we're probably going to see a rate case filed. There's going to be an abbreviated rate case with regard to Evergy that we will have to deal with, and we'll deal with it. There will probably be a rate case or two that'll be filed by maybe our gas utilities or perhaps maybe one of the other electric utilities that we have. So there always seems to be rate cases. We seem to average about 3 a year, and I would anticipate that's going to stay the same. And we'll always go in and we will always fight for the lowest reasonable rates that we can see. The good thing about being an advocate is we get to advocate for our ratepayers. We get to say what we think is best. The hard job belongs to the commission. They've got to balance those interests between the ratepayer and the utility company. So their job is a lot more difficult than us just coming in and advocating. But nonetheless, we're going to advocate as strongly as we can for our group. I mean, that's why you'd hire a lawyer, right? Is to advocate for you. And so we're going to do that. I do want to say one other thing, though, along those lines is that's an important job. But when we get energy efficiency and we've got time of use rates, I think it's really, really important for us to be able to reach out to our consumers and educate them how they can lower their bills. So rather than just seeing a generic rate decrease or generic rate less than a full increase because of our advocacy roles, we can actually reach out and say, hey, look, these are things that are available for you through Evergy, through that energy efficiency case that can actually lower your bills. In particular, where that's important is when we've got low income ratepayers that may be able to address the problems they have with their housing envelope, or other aspects. So those are things we really, really, really want to be able to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I love hearing that because when I worked for Mayor Joe Reardon, we tried to do kind of a full-scale weatherization program because in the eastern part of we have a muni utility, so I know it doesn't affect your all's work as much, but we tried to do that, realizing that we have such an older housing stock that if we could weatherize those homes, it would save our ratepayers dollars on their utility bills, but also save our power plants as well and extend their use. So that the one problem that we had is that in the state's weatherization program, our dollars went to an organization that is miles away from us in Ottawa, Kansas. And we have perfectly fine craftsmen that can do weatherization in our own community. But this organization would bring people from Ottawa, which I felt really increased our carbon footprint, having people come from Ottawa to weatherize our homes in Wyandotte County. And so I never understood why we couldn't control our own weatherization dollars. So anyways, it's not really a question, just an observation. Thank you.
One question I have for you, probably not Curb's not into this, but I've noticed here lately that water is a huge thing. And I've talked to the people from the Topeka area and the people that sell water to our rural water, whatever. And it's up to $10 a thousand. And it's like every year for the next several years of contract, it's enormously going up for water. You know what I'm saying? Is there
Absolutely.
anybody that keeps an eye on that? Because we talked to some people over at, I don't know where you're familiar with Montero. It's over where the Forbes base used to be. And there's about 1,500 units over there, and they buy their water directly from Topeka. And their minimum water, Representative Alcala, what did they say in a delegation meeting? What, about 150 a month or something like that for those people? Yeah, for just minimum. So that's just probably not in your ballpark, but I'm just saying that there's other things affecting people in this state to keep an eye on, and you do a good job. But I just wanted to get that out.
You're absolutely right. And, electricity, gas are certainly very important, but water is essential. And having good potable water and having it at a reasonable price, I can empathize exactly. You point out we have authority, I think, over 2 municipal, maybe even 1 now, municipal water that we can deal with. For the most part, they're usually rural or municipal that we don't that we don't deal with. So so we don't have a lot to deal with those types of entities, but certainly something I think that we need to keep our eye on.
Any other questions, anybody? Well, keep what you're doing and put the squeeze on Evergy and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
If there's no more questions, we'll close the hearing on Curb. Next on the docket is here. Well, here are the hearing on the KCC budget, and Luke will give us a short preview.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Again, Luke Drury, Senior Fiscal Analyst with Kansas Legislative Research. I will be going over the Kansas Corporation's budget for FY 2024 and FY 2025. Behind me in the gallery today is Chair Andrew French, who will be able to speak with the committee a little bit later after my budget analysis to answer any questions the committee may have and also to just speak to the budget. Beginning on page 1, the Kansas Corporation Commission is responsible for regulating and overseeing the safety of public utilities, common carriers, motor carriers, and oil and gas producers. Additionally, the agency is involved in developing the state's energy policy and it administers conservation projects that promote the efficient use of energy. I will begin my presentation on page 3. Similar with the other budgets that we have heard in committee so far, the top table there shows actual expenditures for FY 2023, along with the agency's request for 2024 and 2025, and the governor's recommendation for those years, as well as broken out by expenditure category. This particular agency has more than just one fund that it uses for operations, so the financing table there shows expenditures by fund for those funds that are more commonly used, along with federal funds and then all other funds. Below that table is an examination of the Public Service Regulation Fund. The Public Service Regulation Fund is used to finance payments for outside accounting, legal, and economic advisory services incurred in connection with the investigation of a utility or common carrier for violating, refusing, or failing to obey any lawful requirement or any order of the KCC. The KCC is empowered to assess a fine against a utility or common carrier company undergoing investigation of up to 3/5 of 1% of the gross revenue derived from the company's intrastate operations in the preceding year. When we turn over to page 4, I'll get into a little bit more on the Public Service Regulation Fund. Again, this is a table that you all have seen before. On the left side or in the green columns are revenues to the Public Service Regulation Fund. The right side or red columns are expenditures in a given fiscal year. And then the line that crosses those columns in yellow shows the ending balances. Again, I will state that this is a snapshot in time. So that is to say that as of June 30 in any given calendar year, that was the ending balance for that fund in that fiscal year. The agency estimates increased expenditures from the Public Service Regulation Fund in FY 2024 and for FY 2025 when compared to FY 2023. For 2024, expenditures are estimated to be approximately $4.1 million or 44.1% higher than in 2023. Now, notably, the 2023 legislature had approved expenditures totaling $13.5 million from the Public Service Regulation Fee Fund for the current year, FY 2024. The increase in 2024 then is primarily attributable to ongoing expenditures relating to the overhaul of the agency's docket system, again, as approved by the 2023 legislature. And then similarly, the agency estimates the sustained increases in expenditures from the fund for FY 2025 when compared to previous fiscal years. Next is the Conservation Fee Fund, which is the table there below, shows the 10-year trend of expenditures from the fund. The Conservation Fee Fund provides funding for the administration of operations and oversight of oil and gas activities. This particular fund is funded by assessments and fees on the petroleum industry. When we flip over to the next page, on page 5, there's an examination of that fund's cash flow, expenditures, and revenues as well. Again, left side is revenues, right side is expenditures, and then the line across is ending balances in a given fiscal year. The agency estimates increased expenditures from the Conservation Fee Fund in FY 2024 and for FY 2025 when we compare that to FY 2023. The increase is a result of federal action taken regarding the orphaned well site plugging, remediation, and restoration program. While the agency has secured federal funding for this initiative, the agency is also estimating increased expenditures from the Conservation Fee Fund to plug those wells. Notably, the 2023 legislature had approved expenditures totaling $12.5 million from this particular fund in FY 2024. We turn over onto page 6 is a look at the 2024 analysis. This is a table, again, that will be common throughout all of these budget analysis that you will see. At the top, we begin with the amount approved by the 2023 legislature. Subsequent to the session of 2023, there were no adjustments that were made to the $47 million that was appropriated to the KCC in FY 2024. No changes. Item number 2 on that list is the federal IIJA and IRA initiatives. IIJA is Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. You'll hear that also be called as Bill. The new U.S. Department of Energy federal grant funds made available through the IRA and the IIJA include Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund, Grid Resilience, and IRA rebates. Some expenditures relating to these grants will be used for contracting with vendors to assist with grant writing and program rollout, including the design, implementation, and administration of the grant programs. The agency's revised estimate includes $10.5 million for funding made available through these particular initiatives. Of this amount, $8.9 million is for grants, while the remaining balance is for contracting with vendors to assist with grant writing and program rollout. Item number 3 is the Orphaned Well Program. The agency is responsible for administering the Orphaned Well Program, and the program was created by the federal government about 3 years ago to plug prioritized abandoned wells across the state. As a part of that program, Kansas was awarded $25 million over 3 years. For FY 2024, the agency's revised estimate for the Orphaned Well Program is $6 million above the agency's approved budget. Funding would assist in plugging more than 2,300 abandoned oil and gas wells over the next 2 fiscal years. Item number 4 is existing energy programs. The agency's revised request for FY 2024 includes an increase, and then we turn over to page 7 for the remainder of this analysis. Increase of $1.3 million, all from special revenue funds for energy programs relating to the development and implementation of basic energy conservation plans within the state. Item number 5 is all other adjustments. You also hear these be called rats and cats. All other adjustments made by the agency are attributable to incremental adjustments made across all other funds and across expenditure categories. The governor recommends no changes to the agency's revised estimate for FY 2024. She concurs with the agency's estimate. Mr. Chair, I can answer questions or I can move forward to a change from actual expenditures.
Committee, any questions, or would you want care to Luke to go on? Any questions? Looks like just proceed, Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Then on page 8 is an examination of the FY 2024 revised estimate compared to actual expenditures. The agency estimates revised expenditures of $64.8 million. All from special revenue funds in FY 2024. This is an increase of $14.1 million, or about 27.8% above actual 2023 expenditures. The increase is attributable to the following items below. Expenditures for the energy division are estimated at $12.6 million for FY 2024, which is $11.8 million, or 1,500% above FY 2023 actual expenditures. Now, this is, as we just spoke about earlier, this is primarily attributable to the new federal funding that has been made available in FY 2024 that was not available in 2023. This is directly related to the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act at the federal level. Of this increase in expenditures, $8.9 million is attributable to grants, while the remaining balance is mostly attributable to contracting with outside vendors to assist in grant writing, program rollout, and the such. In the utilities division, increases for FY 2024 total $4 million, again, all from special revenue funds above actual expenditures for 2023. While this does represent an increase in actual expenditures, the estimate does track closely with expenditures approved by the 2023 legislature. As we just spoke about earlier, the increases here are attributable to the overhaul of the agency's docking system, the agency's docket system. In the administration division for FY 2024, increases are about $2 million above FY 2023 actual expenditures. And similarly to the utilities division, while these estimated expenditures in FY 2024 are higher than actual expenditures, they do track closely with what was approved for the division by the 2023 legislature. The increase here, same as the utilities division, is associated with cost related to overhauling the agency's docket system. Moving on then to page number 9 is the FY 2025 analysis. The agency requests expenditures totaling $100.8 million, all from special revenue funds, and 204.5 FTE positions in 2025. The agency's request, absent major changes, is $66.3 million. Again, item 1 here is directly related to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. The new U.S. Department of Energy federal grant funds are made available through these acts for various different energy programs. Some of these expenditures are related to contracting with vendors, and others are for grants, aid to locals, other assistance. The agency's request includes an increase of $34.4 million above the agency's FY 2024 request for funding made available through these initiatives. Of this amount, $30 million is for contracting with the vendors, while $4.4 million is for those grants, which will show as aid to locals and other assistance. The agency's overall request for these particular energy initiatives made available through those federal funds or through those federal acts totals $44.9 million in 2025. The governor concurs with the agency's request and concurs with the agency's request for FTE positions. She recommends no changes. And then, Mr. Chair, I will note for the committee as well, moving on to page 10, is an examination program overview of expenditures across agency program areas by fiscal year, by agency request, and by governor recommendation, along with FTE positions. And then beginning on page 11 and to the end of the document is more detailed information regarding what those agency programs do, where the increases are, where applicable, and just gives a more granular, detailed view of agency budgets. These are provided. This program analysis is provided for every agency that has multiple program areas. So, Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions, or as I indicated earlier, Chair French is here with us in committee today and will be able to speak to the committee.
Committee, any questions for Luke? Good job, Luke. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next, we have not Lynn. You're not Lynn. Come on up and tell me again. You can have Lynn if you want. I think we're going to get Lynn for about 3 days. This will give you a chance to break some new ground.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Chair Corbett and members of the committee. I am Andrew French, Chair of the Kansas Corporation Commission. As you heard in the budget rundown there, the KCC has a pretty expansive, and do we have are our slides available? Okay, do you all have printouts of our presentation? All right. Good to go. Okay. I'll give it just a minute. I think we're going to get the slides up. Well, I'm going to give you a pretty wide overview of the KCC. We do focus a lot on utilities and rate making, as Curb explained, but we have a number of other areas, including pipelines, commercial trucking, oil and gas production. So I want to make sure I hit on everything here. So you can go to the next slide. This here is just the mission statement of the Kansas Corporation Commission. You can read it. It describes the industries that we regulate and our goal for Kansas to be served by safe, reliable, environmentally responsible, diverse energy supplied at the lowest cost, and for safe travel for the motoring public. It's a lot to get all of our missions in there in one mission statement. Next slide. The commission, I'm the chair, but we are made up of 3 commissioners. With me serving as Dwight Keene and Annie Keither. The commission consists of those 3 members. They are appointed by the governor to overlapping 4-year terms. No more than 2 members can be of the same political party. Right now, we actually, none of us are of the same political party. I'm the oddball that's unaffiliated. To carry out our mission, the commission is primarily fee funded and financed from assessments, registration fees, operating charges assessed to the regulated industries. In addition, the commission does receive some funding from federal grants, as you heard in our budget, and from other non-state general fund sources. And just to highlight there, we receive no dollars from the state general fund, but you'll see later in the presentation, we do contribute to the state general fund. The commission has 5 main divisions: administration, conservation, utilities, transportation, and energy. And the authority of the commission is derived from the statutes that are listed on that slide. Next slide. This is an overview of the divisions that I just listed. I don't know that we need to read through each of these, but as I said, we have the administration division, which, as you might guess, covers administration of the agency. It includes the commissioners, our executive director, and the divisions that are listed there. We also have the conservation division. That is the division that oversees production of oil and gas within the state. Protects correlative rights, protects fresh water of the state, and prevents waste in that industry. Our next division is the one that gets a lot of headlines, utilities division. We've got Mr. Jeff McClanahan here, the head of that division. They are responsible for overseeing the rates and terms of service of all the public utilities in our state, including electric, natural gas, liquid pipelines, and telecommunications. Not water for the most part, although we've had a couple run-ins. Next slide. We also have a transportation division. That is the division that oversees commercial trucking within the state to assure appropriate and effective regulatory oversight of motor carriers. We do this primarily through licensing, education, and inspection. And some of that activity takes coordination with the Kansas Highway Patrol, which is pretty comprehensive on our behalf. And I've got Mr. Mike Hamey behind me. He's the division director for our transportation division, if you have any specific questions there. Finally, our energy division administers a variety of statewide K-12 energy education programs, energy efficiency audits, and assistance to small business owners, agricultural producers in rural Kansas. I would also point out that this is the division that has been tasked with evaluating all of the federal funds that may be available through the IIJA and the IRA, determining if it's appropriate for the state to apply for those funds, and then to the extent we apply and receive those funds, figuring out how to implement those programs. And Lynn Retz, while she is our executive director, she also wears the hat of being the energy division director, and she'd be more than happy to address any questions on those federal funding opportunities. Next slide. So here is the broad regulatory of the KCC. As we mentioned, the KCC regulates 5 industries that are important to Kansas. Those include natural gas, electricity, telephone, and transportation vendors, and we ensure that those provide safe, adequate, and reliable services at reasonable rates. And we are also responsible for overseeing oil and gas production within the state and protecting correlative rights and the fresh and usable water of the state. The KCC, notably here, we get a lot of questions on some of these. We do not regulate most electric cooperatives, water cooperatives, as I said, municipalities, wireless telephone, long distance service, cable companies, and everybody's favorite thing for me to ask me whether I regulate it. We do not regulate the internet. Next slide. And this is our final slide. This is just commission activity within the last calendar year. We held 96 commission business meetings, which is our primary method for issuing decisions. We held 14 evidentiary hearings. Most of you know the commission essentially acts as a quasi-judicial body similar to a court, and we perform that function through holding hearings. We also held 3 public hearings. I could be wrong, but I think all 3 of those public hearings were related to the Evergy rate case, for us to go out and hear folks' opinions on that application as the proceeding was going on. Orders total within fiscal year 2023. We issued almost 3,500 orders. Some of those can be simple, a couple page orders. Some of those are very complex, but it gives you a good idea of the amount of paper that flows through our agency. And then you also have a listing here of penalty orders and fines that we assessed. And you'll see in total, we assessed over $1.1 million of fines. Those fines do not go to the KCC. Those go to the state general fund. So as I mentioned earlier, we don't take any state general fund monies, but we do contribute any fines that we assess to the state general fund. And I believe that's the end of my presentation. And we've got Lynn's contact information at the end. But I'd be willing to stand for any questions. And to the extent I can't answer it, I'll have the folks behind me help out.
Committee, any questions? Representative Jacob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 9 of the budget, and I guess we could just talk about the money with the 34.4 increase for the grants or the money that's there.
Is that 24 or 25?
25, page 9.
25, page 9.
I see it.
So
Where is it?
what
Do I have the
what
wrong
has
one
to be
again?
done? I mean, what kind of projects are we looking at to get that money, and who's able to apply for that?
It's a good question. I'm going to hand it off to Lynn. That's in her wheelhouse.
Okay, on page 9 for our budget of 2025, repeat the question of the $34.4 million for the grants. What projects are we looking at? Who can apply for those?
Okay, Lynn Retz with the Kansas Corporation Commission Executive Director. So there's various grants. We've got several coming out from under the IIJA and the IRA. So we have the 40101D, which is the Grid Resiliency Grant. That is open to utilities, co-ops, munis, IOUs that meet certain requirements to do resiliency projects. We just closed out our first round of grants applications the end of 2023. We're reviewing those, and those dollars will flow out to the subrecipients. We have the IRA rebates. There's 2 rebates programs. The applications due for those are not actually due to DOE until January of 2025. Those would be open to residentials. The Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant will be open to municipalities. That application has been made to DOE, but not awarded yet. but it would also be a pass through to municipals and counties. The Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund, that one has also been applied for to DOE. It has not been awarded yet. It is also a subsequent pass through, most likely to municipalities and school districts and regions, higher education.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Could you, if, with the permission, would you send us a list of that? So that
Yes.
we can have that in writing? And
I actually have the same table I presented last week before the committee, and I had a table in my presentation. I will send that to you, which breaks it out.
Just send them to Josh, and he'll get them to
Okay.
everybody.
are you guys doing anything to make the public aware of these benefits at all?
As well, on the rebates for the residentials, part of that application process that we have to do, which is one of the reasons why we will be engaging a third-party contractor to help us, is we do have to have an education and outreach plan developed so that it outlines how we will make the public aware of those rebate opportunities. The 401(d) grid resiliency, when we got ready to do that, we did do a webinar. We pushed out information to the co-ops, the munis. Once we have the award on the EECBG, the block grant, and on the revolving loan fund, we will push information out to the entities that would be available to receive those. We just don't do that prematurely until we know that we've actually been awarded the funding by DOE, and we kind of have a timeline as to when we will actually receive the funds from DOE.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Committee, any more questions, Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Lynn, I was having a little bit of difficulty hearing you, and you were looking at him, and my
Sorry.
hearing aids, if I'm looking at you, I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I should
That's
have been
just
watching you.
new to me. I'm trying to learn how to use them. But I had made a note when I looked through this yesterday. I don't know what some of these things really are. I think I can figure out the rebates, but what is grid resilience and energy efficiency? I mean, I think I can get energy efficiency. What's a grid resilience, and who applies for that?
So the grid resiliency, the 401(d) grant, that is eligible to the co-ops, the munis, the IOUs.
I don't know what those things are. I'm sorry.
Okay, so
IOUs?
the investor-owned utilities would be, so it is literally projects to make it more, to provide grid resiliency projects. And I'm not going to remember all of them off the top of my
I want to know
head.
what the word means. What is grid resiliency? What is it?
Well, now I'm going to have our resident expert
Okay.
come up from the
Okay,
utility
that's
division.
what I needed to know. I know the processes are probably same as most people's, but
Good afternoon, Committee. Jeff McClanahan. I'm the Director of the Utilities Division with the KCC. Grid resiliency is a broad term, and there's a lot of technological things that can be done underneath that. But it encompasses a wide gamut of things. So fire protection, just clearing out from underneath transmission lines to prevent fires from damaging your transmission infrastructure. It can go to enhanced communication systems so that are placed on your distribution or your transmission lines such that you know exactly where an outage is, or it can self-correct itself. So there's a lot of technology that could be involved in that resiliency, but it is effectively a term used to indicate an increase in reliability, that you can get to repairs quicker, you can prevent outages, and you have a better feel for what's going on your electrical system. Does that help?
I think it does. It helps a lot. I just didn't know quite what it would encompass. So it's anything you do to protect the grid. We do.
Or improve the grid.
But you get a grant to improve. So you may be putting chat around the grid or something.
Right. And you know, the grants are to get us going down that road. The utilities are already looking at some grid resilience on their own. So it's a combination of things, but that's a focus right now moving forward is grid resilience.
Well, I appreciate that. I think energy efficiency, now, are those grants to cities and are they in they're not CDBG grants.
So the energy efficiency conservation block grant.
Okay.
So those are, we have to make those available as a pass through to communities, cities, municipalities, counties.
So how does one benefit from that? Is it communities that benefit, or individuals, or neighborhoods, or?
It would be the cities or the counties that apply for them, and we've had, DOE has set parameters on what those can be used for by the municipalities. Um, ours, our award will be a total of 1.9 million. That's the maximum DOE will give us, which, as you can imagine, will not go very far.
So that would be for all over the state,
Correct.
whoever gets to you first and has a good story. Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you clearing that up, because sometimes these words just get buried in the text and we just go on. And I really did need to ask that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, any questions? I've got a couple of questions. We've heard from the Panasonic people earlier in the week. So this is kind of a good question between you got KCC and Curb. So if Panasonic's going to need as much power as they think they do, is that where do you think that could be supplied without a rate increase for all the rest of the state to make sure that happens?
Well, it's definitely a question that's on everybody's mind, where we are. I'd just say we're probably too early to tell exactly what their needs are going to be, and what they're working on with Evergy. Um, I will tell you, you've kind of got two parts to the question, which is, where's the power supply going to come from? And that's something we're engaging with them all the time to make sure the utility has enough power. Because from my perspective, it is unacceptable to say we can't have economic development in the state because we don't have enough power to supply it. That's got to be there, and so we want to make sure that that's going to be there. Now, the rate making aspect is different. We just don't know what the rate impact is going to be at this point. I don't have any reason to suspect that Panasonic is going to cause a rate increase to customers. I know our chief of finance addressed this in House Energy the other day, because he got some questions anticipating that Panasonic had talked about that they are negotiating some sort of rate agreement between them and Evergy. Now, we haven't seen that. It is subject to our approval. I think the only answer that Mr. Grady was able to give, and I would agree with this, is whatever rate they end up paying, them locating in the state has got to be a net benefit to Kansas customers. Otherwise, I think Mr. Grady's words are, what's the point of adding them to the system if it doesn't ultimately benefit Kansas customers? So, but we don't know we have not seen any sort of contract. Nothing's been filed with us for approval. So it's too early to do the math.
So this will just be a what if then. If for the power that they think they might need, we don't know. But the stories that I've been hearing that there won't be enough green energy to keep that plant rolling. Is that what you've heard?
It's a nuanced answer. There is probably enough. There's a lot of green energy, but that's different than saying 24/7 on demand. The electrons that they flow are going to be, wind energy, solar energy. They're going to get the mix of whatever's on the system. So, and that's the obligation of our utility and for us overseeing them to make sure that power is available 24/7 on demand. So I will say Panasonic said it, and I think it's true. A big part of why they located here is that we do have really abundant, low cost wind power, probably some solar coming online. It's a big part of our mix in Kansas, and that's alluring to folks like them that want to soak that up. But at the same time, they're going to get a full mix of whatever's on the system that keeps the system in balance.
I've got a couple more. It says here you do telephone, but you don't do long distance, and you don't do wireless. So basically, then is that just landlines in the ground?
Primarily, it's rural telephone systems. Jeff, do you want to elaborate on that? I mean, it's your rural service, and they're converting, doing more fiber projects, but that's pretty much the extent of it. And we have the Universal Service Fund, which is a fund that helps keep those systems vibrant, basically, and we audit that, and we regulate the disbursements of that to those rural providers. But yeah, it's primarily landline telephone and now some fiber.
So I'm not that far from you, but in my neck of the woods, there the landlines have been in there probably 50, 60 years plus, and it gets to the point that when it gets time for you to renew for the next year, once they double, and your a landline's $150 a month, it's not there doesn't seem like there's anybody watching the telephone people. And then the other problem is your cell service is not that great yet. And if you have a medical problem, if you got one bar or two bars, it gets to be kind of I don't know who watches these people, and I'm not that far from rural. I'm not rural compared to some rural, but that's what I hear a lot. It's they're in a fix.
Yeah, and I should probably clarify, we don't regulate a lot of the rates to deal with your landline service. It's more the funding that goes to offset some of that.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I'll clarify just a bit here real quick. The local landline that we regulate, there's a statute that allows for an affordable rate increase on an annual basis that sets those rates. The KUSF fund then helps supplement that in terms of the shortfall in the revenues that they would receive for just those landline services. So effectively, that's what we have authority over. But the problem is, as you indicate, more and more people are dropping their landline, but you still have basically the same cost structure, right? So costs go up, and so landlines are dying. It's a question of when. The technology is decades old, supporting landlines. So the push for additional internet and better wireless service are critical, really, to serve rural areas.
So it kind of intrigues me here, where it just shows here the total orders and the following penalty orders. Like, give me an example of a conservation fine. What would cause a conservation fine?
oh gosh, a spill that isn't cleaned up in a timely fashion in accordance with our regulations.
Basically oil and basically these are basically most oil fines.
Yeah, it'd be oil or a gas well. A failure to conduct a mechanical integrity test that we require to be conducted every 5 years. A failure to folks are required, if they've abandoned a well, they've got to file a filing of temporary abandonment. If you don't make those filings, you could be subject to fines. So there's sort of a list of the frequent ones you see, and then you get into some more specialized situations. But yeah, things like failure to file a temporary abandonment application. I mean, that would take up a lot of these.
The last one I'll ask you, like on your transportation fines, is that basically truckers? Is that basically what would cause them to be fined?
Yeah, so if we do a roadside inspection, or Highway Patrol does a roadside inspection, and we find, there's a whole list of federal regulations that we're enforcing, and if we find noncompliance with that, it could be just a roadside inspection, but it could also be a follow up to an accident that occurred. I don't know if you have any additional you'd want to add on that, Mike.
Mr. Chairman, Mike Amy, Transportation Director, Kansas Corporation Commission. We're statutorily required to follow up on any new motor carrier that applies for KCC authority within 18 months. And then we also follow up on any fatality accidents. We deal with complaints from enforcement through roadside inspections, as the chair indicated. There's a number of indicators that not having authority, not registering for unified carrier registration, an interstate fee, things like that. But there's a number of different variables to factor in why we do on-site, comprehensive on-site, or follow up to a comprehensive on-site. And then we penalize for driver qualification files, not having DOT physicals, not having a CDL, substance and alcohol testing. A big one is falsification of hours of service, not having an hours of service program. Hazardous materials, there's a number of different violations we charge for there.
So do you think maybe on these 573, do you think most of those are just people in Kansas moving stuff, or people coming through Kansas that just don't have the right stuff yet to be coming through our highway? Do you think you think it's about, how do you think that would mix out?
Well, we have a very extensive education program for the carriers that go through our, apply for operating authority. They have to attend the class, or we give them a checklist of everything that they'll have to do to be in compliance. And it's been very successful. As you can see by our performance-based budget, our motor carriers are safer than our surrounding states considerably. So our education works for the people, the entities that want to take advantage of it. A lot of our fines are coming from Western Kansas. We don't have a large enforcement presence out there, roadside enforcement presence, the Highway Patrol. So we're seeing more issues out there because of that. And a lot of them are people that have moved in, some groups that, minority groups that are causing a lot of these issues.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, anybody? Great job, everybody. It looks like you're awful busy and you've got job security till all of you can retire, it looks like to me. So if there's no more questions, we're going to close the hearing on the KCC. So thank you, guys. What's your pleasure? You want to work these today or come back tomorrow? Ready? Would you feel like working these today or do it tomorrow? Today? Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we pass out, or I move that we go ahead and work these budgets today and pass them out. And I will make another motion. Do we need to vote on that? Yes, all in favor? Anybody opposed to that? Okay, I would like to make another motion then that we pass we can start with the one we just did, the Kansas Corporation budget as presented today. Pardon me? As presented with the governor's recommendations, yes.
Any comments?
Second, yes, second.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification that the motion is to pass out the budget as presented for fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025.
Yes, sir. 24 and 25.
Do you have a second on that? Are we good?
That was Randy.
Okay.
You seconded, right?
Those in favor of, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Done. Representative?
Oh, okay. And Mr. Chair, I move that we pass out the Citizens Utility Ratepayer Board budget for 24 and 25 as recommended by the governor.
Second.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We've shoveled it out. Meeting adjourned.